Hey, hello everybody. I'm glad to see you again on my webinar. This is the webinar number 50, and we're going to talk about object-oriented programming again. I will share with you one design concept which I don't think invented, but which I used in a few of my projects, and which helped me a lot with the design problems I had. So let me get straight to the problem we're going to talk about. The problem with the databases. So you are, let's say, you want to. Let me show you what I was doing. It was Ruby. I was programming in Ruby. So I had a list of projects. Actually, I had a database in the Postgres database. There was something like this: table project with columns, something like ID, integer, and let's say title, varchar, something like this. So I had a table in the SQL database, and then I had a class in Ruby, which let me save this. Let me save this to make sure the syntax is highlighted. Yeah. So I had a class in Ruby which was supposed to be designed like this. I had a constructor which I don't know why it's highlighting my syntax this way, but anyway, and the ID. I swear this is not my way of highlighting Ruby. And then something like this. That was the design I was using. This PGSQL is the library, which is providing me access to SQL database. This is not ORM, this is not object relationship mapping, it's just a normal connection to the database, which works something like this. I do PG, so this is the constructor, I'm sure you understand. So I'm just constructing the object, and then I store it in the properties. So there are two attributes. This is the attribute of an object, and then I do something like this. Exec, select, title from project where ID equals question mark, and then I do ID. Something around this. This is not an exact code, so it's more like a pseudo code, but you get the idea. So when it returns me, what it's coming out of there is basically something like this. I can make it more easy for you to understand. So it's a record from the database, and then I do return record title. And in Ruby, you don't need to say return. You just, okay, let's say return. So that's mandatory, but this is not mandatory. But anyway, so you return the title, and that's okay. So far, so good. This is the really, in my opinion, really object-oriented way to design an object which represents a record in the database. So I have something in my database, I have a record, which is the project, and then this stuff is actually easy to use. So I can say something like this: p equals projects.new, and then I give it some PGSQL library which knows how to work with the database, and then I say 1, 2, 3, and then I can say p title, and the title will be returned. It will be equal to something, I don't know, Acme, some project, and I am able to do. I am able to rename the project. Let's say I can do title equals. This is the way. This is the way Ruby does setters, and here I would do. Again, this is so far a perfect object-oriented way, in my opinion. Update project set title equals to something where ID equals ID, and then I say this. So I update it, and then after I say title, I can do p title equals. That's how it does. Because when I do title equals, it basically technically does this. So it calls this method, and it requests the update. But it's more, in more Ruby way is to write it this way. So far, so good. Now the question comes up: what happens if I want to retrieve a collection of projects? Let's say this is a perfect object-oriented class, but then I have another class which is called projects. And projects also has a constructor which is also encapsulates the connection to the database, but it doesn't need the ID. All it needs is the objects. And then I have another method which would be called, let's call it fetch, or let's say, I don't know, mine. No, let's do all objects, all projects. And here, to retrieve all objects, what I do is that I do something like this. I do records, so I retrieve all of them from project. I remove this, and now I have a collection of records coming from the table records. Okay, I can do some, some limits to make sure there's not too many of them. But anyway, that's not important. So I retrieve, let's say, all projects from the entire table in the database. And then I want to return, I don't want this method to return me a collection of records, which are technically in Ruby. Each record is, if you look at this, then each record is basically a hash map. So I don't want a collection of hash maps. I want a collection of instances of class project. So how do I do this? In Ruby, it's easy to do. There is a method map, which does this, map do. So you do one record, and then you map each record. This is mapping, just a simple mapping. So what you do here is you do project new pg SQL R ID. So here I'm calling the constructor, as you can see, I'm calling this constructor here, and I map each record, I map to the project. So far, so good. However, if we do it this way, if I do projects new pg SQL, and then I do all, and then I do 15, and then I do title, then here, at this point of time, we will run another select to the database. You can understand why. Because here we retrieve the full collection of all records, and then they're all mapped. But the information from here, all this star, is lost, because all we use is just the ID. So basically, it's better to do it like this. Because the star, the data which is coming from database, is lost here because all we use is just the ID. And if I do it massively, let's say I want to render them all on the HTML page, and then I will do something like this, all, each, do, p. This is project, right? And I will do p title, and let's say I'm going to do it like this. I don't know, p title. And then I will do, I don't know, I'm just improvising here. So in this case, if I retrieve, let's say 100 projects, then 100 projects will cause one SQL request for the select from project. And then I will have 100 requests select title. So it's completely inefficient, completely less. I mean, I'm gonna lose a lot of time. You can understand how many round trips I will make to the database. So it's absolutely not effective. So how do I solve this? It's the question. I don't want to. Well, okay. There's a brute force solution. Is that we can. Let's improvise. Let me show you how I was thinking for actually a few years. So first of all, the first option is to do this. So not only pass the ID, but also pass here the hash map. Let's save it, I don't know, let's call it, how would we call it? Let's say data, a very stupid name, but data. And then I can do data here. And then here I would say, okay, if, I don't even know well, okay, I would do this. If data key title, then return data title. In Ruby, you can do it like this. So return and then if later. So I return title if blah 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 blah. If it doesn't, if it's not there, and I can make the default one. So let's say by default it's empty. So I return title. I was doing that for a few years in many projects of mine. So I just make the object project bigger. So I put some logic, some logic of this pre-cached, of the pre-calculated data. I just put it into the object, and I say, you know what? Sometimes people will initialize you, and they will provide without not only the ID, but they will provide you some hash map, and inside that hash map, you may see the title there. And if you see it there, and then I ask you for the title, then return me the title. However, the question is now is what happens if I do it? What happens if I do this? Let's say this is my object project, and then I say I do it this way: projects equals to. No, instead of making the project the traditional way, let's put it this is one way, and we have another way to make the project. I do projects new PG SQL, and then I do all, and then project number 5. So in this case, of course, the P title will be fast. That will be fast because it will be preloaded. But if I do this, if I rename the project, then P2 title will not be changed. Still the same. So basically, I break the functionality. The functionality of the object project is not the same. It's broken because changing title here is not updating the pre-cached data here. So to do that, what do? I update it, but before I update it, I say data title equals nil or something. So I just remove the element from the hash map. So now it's more or less okay. It's more or less okay. However, the problem is that the object has 2 lines, basically not 2 lines, 1 line, another line, another line, another piece of text. They don't belong to the functionality of the project class. And the more classes I have, like project, the more code duplication will be there. So I will have to do it again and again in many places, this functionality. If I have project, it's one story. I have user, another story. And if I have more methods like this, the title, I don't know, the description of the project, all the possible methods which I may have here, they will all be the same. I'll repeat the same functionality. So my class here will be polluted by this garbage, by this functionality which does not belong to the functionality of the project by itself. So where do I put it? How do I do this? So I came up with a quite simple idea. How about I create another object? I call it veil object. That's the name I'm suggesting, veil object. I don't know how you like the name, but that's what it looks like. Let me show you how it works, and then we judge the name. So how about I create another class, which I would call veil, and it will store in its constructor. It will store the original object, which it decorates. It's not exactly the decorator, but stay with me for a minute, and I'll show you. And then data, and then it encapsulates the origin, and it encapsulates the data. And then whatever method you call, I'm not going to show you how it works in Ruby, but you will understand the idea. So whatever method it calls, it will do this functionality. It will say return whatever if this whatever exists. And if it doesn't exist, then go to origin and get it from there. I don't know, do the magic go to the database. So I'm not going to show you the details of the implementation, but you get the idea. So to work here, we do it like this. So I provide this veil object. I provide the original object, and then I provide a collection. In Ruby, you can do it like this. Like whatever we want. All the possible stuff. This basically, technically, it's just Ruby makes it easier to write, but technically it's a hash map like this. But in Ruby, you can omit this if it goes or like last parameter, you can do it like this, so it's shorter. So we create the object where we pass the original object and a collection, a hash map of data, which this veil decorator may expose to the client, to whoever is asking. And if those requests for the data will hit any of these attributes, data attributes, let's put it, let's be honest, then everything is okay. But as soon as somebody will touch and do something which doesn't look like title, but instead looks like title, like this, then the entire set of this pre-cached data will be destroyed, and the veil object will behave like the object it encapsulates. So it's like a veil which covers the object for some time. It covers it until the object stays in read-only mode. When clients are just reading, and in this case, we're just exposing the data and letting the data go out until while we're just reading. When at some point of time we stop reading and start writing to the object, start asking the object to do something else, aside from this simple data exposing, then at that point of time, veil becomes just drops everything and says, okay, now you talk directly, now you deal directly with the project, with the original object. That's the concept, and it's quite useful. I can show you how it's designed in the real world. So this is the real. Jesus, this is not my colors. Believe me, I don't know why it's using these colors now. But yeah, they look ugly. But take a look. This is the real project on the real application. So that's how I'm doing. So look, I'm retrieving the collection of objects from the database. So this is the method. It's called recent. So the user is asking, show me the recent projects from the database. There's like a limit, how many, where to start. There's some filters. So first of all, we build a quite large SQL query. So we just build it like how to select it correctly. And many of you understand this syntax, but if you don't, I highly encourage you to do it this way. So don't rely on this ORM frameworks, but instead use SQL language directly. So here we build a quite long query, and then we go to the database. Look, I'm doing exec, and then I do the select, which is the quite large query. Then I should do some limitations here, and then everything else. And then I do mapping, just like I showed you before. I do map, and then I map each record, which is coming from the database. I map to an object. So this toObj is the method I'm going to show you. It's down below in the class. And look, I go to this method now. I'll show you how we map project by project. But look what else we're doing here. We're also veiling the full collection. So the full collection will also receive a new property, which is called count. Well, the default collection, which is coming from here, also has the property count. But we are introducing on the higher level, on the level of decoration, we're introducing the same property with the same name, count. So this count will be touched first. And here we say we do select count from blah 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 without the limit, without the offset. So that is a huge save on efficiency, a huge help for the efficiency, because this selection may create, let's say we have in a database 5 million records, and we're asking only for the first 100. But this one, the count one, will retrieve all of them and make actually the count, which is very effective database operation, and will show in the collection which is returned, the collection will contain just 100 items, but the count property will expose number 5 million. And it's not going to be absolutely visible to the user. The user will not understand why it's happening. The user will just get a collection of 100 elements, and when it's necessary to say how many in total, so show me the count, and the collection will say 5 million. And the user will not see what's happening inside, and the collection will not know what's happening inside. So the collection itself will contain 100 elements and only know about 100 elements. But the decorator which stays on top of the collection will know about this 5 million. So that's the beauty of object-oriented programming, I think. And let's take a look at this toObj method, which is inside, and look how complex it is. So we are basically, we're making the original object like a normal object. So this we just create, this is not get, it doesn't go to the database, it just builds the object using the ID. So that's exactly how I showed you before. So we did just use the ID from the record, and then we decorate this original object P with many data elements, ID, coordinates, platform, even some deleter, which is the link to another object. So it's quite complex object, quite complex structure. Also another veiling here with some date, again some person, also veiling it there. Again, we do review counts. That's also interesting because when we do the retrieval from the database, we in one large select request, we select projects, and also using subqueries or inner joins, we count how many reviews each project has. So the result table, which is coming from the database, contains all the columns which belong to the project, but also extra columns, for example, review count. And this review count is a good property for the object which we return, but we don't want the project to recalculate that again. So that's why we give it here, like an extra property. Or here, for example, it's a collection of badges which are attached to the object. Again, we do collection of badges. Again, we just veil it here, so it's a pretty complex structure. And all of this together make it possible if you look at the in the HTML where we draw these projects, then you can see that we do just list each do. So this is how we iterate through projects, and then we convert them to HTML. And it's quite easy. We say coordinates, badges. We don't care at the level of presentation where we draw the HTML. We don't care about performance anymore. We just easily deal with objects, just like we have to deal with objects. So this is pure object-oriented approach at the level of presentation. So we don't care how fast it's going to be. So I say, for example, here, I go through project by project, and I say, okay, here's the project, show me all the badges which are attached to you. And here, show me who's the author, who submitted this project. And then, okay, tell me when it was created, and how many review counts do you have? And I don't care how many SQL queries are supposed to be run here, like are you going to go make a round trip to the database or are you going to not? So all of this information is hidden at the level of this decorate or this veil object, which decorated the whole show. And at the level of presentation, that's all I'm doing. This is my entire HTML presentation for the list of projects. Which makes it so beautiful because here I work only with the simple. I know that P is not a collection, is not a record from the database. It's a normal object, an object which has methods, which has behavior, and I can easily mock this object. This is like, I'm really here doing object-oriented programming. Because I had this veil decorator, which managed to hide all the complexity inside and expose the data. That's how I thing. Yeah, you're saying that's a nice query. We have actually I do, you know, I do build, you know, long queries, and I think this is how it should be done when we work with the database. So I strongly recommend you not to rely on object relational mapping frameworks, but instead learn SQL and build this request yourself. It's not so difficult, and when you do it yourself like this, then you have full control over everything that is happening in the database. So you know exactly how the data is coming out, you know exactly how they're organized, and then you can manipulate with the data where you need to manipulate with the data. So here, object, which is called projects are the collection of projects. Actually, I can show you the project object as well. Just like I promised you, it has like a PGSQL, the ID, and that's it. So no data is here, you see? So we don't pre-cache anything. When I talk to projects, look here, then I can say P coordinates. But if you go back to project, these coordinates, if you look at this, you will see that what coordinates means, look, column, and column is the function in here, which does, look what it does. It goes to the database. It makes a round trip to the database, just like in my example. Select the name of the column from project where ID equals something. So if I here call P coordinates, then if I go to the class project, if I'm the new to this whole code base, then I will be asking myself, like, how was it designed that the coordinates is supposed to make a round trip to the database? The coordinates will make a round trip. P badges, let's take a look what's happening when I call P badges. Badges is also, yeah, badges is making new class badges, which will definitely, if I go to badges class, it definitely will make a round trip to the database. Look, if I say 2A, you see, this is the converted to the array, then it will make a round trip again to the database. So it's going to select all the badges from the database. But it's not happening. At this level, all of these requests to all of these properties of the project, of the object project, they are not happening because the project is veiled. It has this decorator which brings all the data together for the to the presentation level, to the presentation layer. So it is like multi-layered architecture, actually, nothing new actually, you know, that's the classic example. We have the presentation, we have the persistence layer, then we have, they call it service layer or business layer, and then we have presentation layer. So at the storage layer, at the persistence layer, we keep the data in the database, and then we retrieve it, and it's coming to the business layer. And the business layer is actually the object. So this object project is where all the business is happening, is where all the logic of the application is happening. But then we want to jump to the presentation layer. And at the presentation layer, we don't want to make round trips so frequently to the business layer. We want to, you know, to have to deal there with objects which look the same. That's very important. So the objects, they want to look the same, but we want them to be more more prepared for more intensive usage. And by intensive usage, I mean, you know, asking this object for more data very frequently. So that's the concept of how it works. So let me see your questions if you have any. I see that we have some questions. Maybe I can also show you, hold on, maybe I can also show you how, well, I can show you, but how this veil is designed inside, but that's not fun at all. It's just a very simple decorator in Ruby. It's actually open source, so you can use it as well in your own projects. I'm using them like this. Look, require veil. So this veil is coming from this project, which is called, you can find it on GitHub. Here, So this is the address where you just get it for your Ruby. I mean, maybe not all of you write in Ruby, maybe not actually many of you write in Ruby, but I believe we can do something similar to other languages. The only problem with this approach is that it's not going to be suitable for languages with strict typing, for example, Java or C++, where we have to know, the structure of where it's not possible to call whatever method you want on an object and then let the object decide what to do with this request. It's not possible in Java, fortunately or unfortunately, difficult to say, but in Ruby it works, in JavaScript it's going to work, in PHP it's going to work, in Python it's going to work, so in many other languages it may work. So if you want, you can create something like this for another language and use it in your own code and use it in your own project. For Java, it's not possible to do it like this, unfortunately. So how to apply this paradigm to Java, I still don't know. If you do, you're welcome to suggest your solution, but I don't know how to do it. And that's why I have to say, that's why I think Java is, less powerful. Of course, there are benefits of having this strict typing because people don't do this stuff, because people are not allowed to break the rules and design objects like this. But I think this design is not breaking the fundamental principles of object-oriented programming. It only makes stuff better because we just introduce an extra layer on top of an object and make this layer a bit more flexible than just a simple decorator. So just a decorator will copy the interface of an object, like in Java. When you decorate something, then you copy one-to-one, method-to-method, you copy the interface exactly. In this design, we don't copy exactly. We have the core interface with maybe, for example, 5 methods, and then we introduce another layer on top of the object with 55 methods, temporarily. We don't go for, maybe in Java it's possible to do that, but you will have to design, you will have to have 2 classes. You will have to have one class which is the core class, and then you have to design, like create a new class, a new file, a new Java file, where you design it and you put all these 50 methods and then they work together. It's possible. Actually, I was wrong saying it's not possible. It's possible, but it's not going to be elegant. It's not going to be really convenient to maintain this large class. In Ruby, it's made on fly. In Ruby, it's like, you see, I make it on fly. So there is no any place where I explain that it's going to be a new class. This class is actually created here. Not created, the class is not created, but this veil object behaves like a new class. In Java, I would have to design this class manually. It's possible, yeah, but not as elegant as Ruby allows you to do. So think about it. Maybe you can do it in Java as well. There's a question coming saying that is it a proxy pattern or not? I'm not sure I know what is proxy pattern. Let me Google it. Proxy pattern. I constantly forget these names. Proxy pattern. In computer, I'm on Wikipedia now. A proxy is a class functioning as an interface to something else. The proxy could interface to anything, blah, blah, blah. Network connection or large. I don't know. It seems that proxy is, let me see the UML. It seems that proxy is more like a facade to something. Look, the proxy implements the subject. I don't know. Maybe it's a proxy. No, it seems that in case of proxy, they have different interfaces. So they have, I don't know, I'll need to investigate, but maybe I just explained you something which was invented before, but I've never seen it before. proxy access, like if you guys can help me with this, then probably you can. So let me answer other questions and then we'll get back to proxy. Again, the question is, what is the alternative for this method in Java or C#? I just tried to answer it. In Java, it's not possible. In Java, you cannot call any method you want, so there's no possibility. So in Java, you will have to manually specify it. That's the only way. Yeah, that's a good question. Is coming. Don't you think that the project is too large to be called cohesive? That's a good point, because here that's actually why I started to use this approach, because the project, I didn't want the project to become large. I didn't want the project to be too big. That's why I was trying to keep it as short as possible. Okay, it's not that small here. It has like maybe 10 methods or something, because basically it's concerned about retrieving the data from the database and presenting the record in a database. So it can be broken down into smaller pieces. But here, when I build it together, so I basically expose the functionality which already exists here in this original object, and then I add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like another 10 methods on top of the object. So I make it even bigger. So is it cohesive at this point? I think it loses cohesion, definitely, because we are, we're, okay, it becomes larger. So definitely it is a problem. But for the presentation layer here, it seems like, look, it's how many times it's used here. It seems like a good something, but I understand your concern about cohesion. So okay, let's say we want to make the application better, more cohesive. So we are crazy object-oriented designers and we want to do it right. So we want our objects to be like 3-5 methods top, not 15 like here, but 3-5. And what do we do in this case? In this case, we break down the project class, the original project, into 3 classes. It's going to be project, it's going to be project, I don't know, project with badges, not the project, it's going to be like project, project details, project badges, something like this. So we break it down into elements. And then we still want to add this veiling, these decorators on these 3 elements. I think so. I'm not doing it in these applications because going so crazy in this object-oriented direction only, it decreases the cohesion, definitely, but that increases the amount of elements that programmer has to deal with. And in modern object-oriented languages, they are not designed to deal with clean object-oriented approach. So in Ruby, for example, it's better to have classes less cohesive, but at the same time more convenient to use. That's probably my answer. Another question, yeah, what about proxy? We're discussing here, is it proxy or not? Yeah, it's not a good comment that this veil decorator could cause a lot of boilerplate code in Java, unfortunately. That's exactly what I said. So but you will have to design a long, Java classes, and it's gonna be, it is possible still, but maybe you have to switch to like Java around Java languages like Kotlin or Groovy. They will allow you to do that. Another question, is there a way to reset the peer state or maybe control it after some event? That's a good question. I didn't think about that. And in my case, it's never needed. So as soon as it's pierced, as soon as I touch the object in a non-read-only way, then the whole set of data is destroyed, and then you deal with the object on your own. But in these web applications, objects, they live for microseconds. They're coming from the database, they live for a few microseconds, they are used in the presentation layer, and then they're gone. So they don't live for too long. This veiling is necessary for projects with a very short lifetime. They just get out from like DTO, like data transfer objects, the same story. They're coming from the database, we just decorate them, we give it to the presentation layer use them, and they're gone. So if somebody will pierce them on this way, then actually Actually, it happened when I was debugging this, when I was just designing that initially. I saw that this piercing was happening sometimes in an unexpected way. For example, you create an object. That's what happened. That was happening. I was creating an object. I was getting the record from the database. Then I was making the object. Then I was decorating this with the veil, and then I was giving it to the presentation layer. And then I saw that the performance was not improved. When I was looking at the logs, I saw that that the round trips to the database were still happening multiple times for each project. For each project, when they were listing, when they goes like one by one in the HTML, they still were making round trips. And I was searching for where the piercing happened. So somebody probably was touching the object. Was touching one of the attributes, one of the methods of the object, which were not presented in the veil decorator. And that's why the piercing was, that the veil was pierced, boom, removed, the data cache is removed, and then they started making round trips. So that could be, that's a good, actually, good question, good point. Then I even added the logging into this library, this Ruby library. I added the logging feature, which is saying on the log that boom, the project just got pierced by the call to this particular method. And when you design the application, when you develop it, you look at what's happening on the logs, and you see that something is pierced, and you understand that you need to add one more element to the pierce. And also, I also made it possible in this library to make the object unpierceable. So no matter what happens, you still keep the data in, even if somebody is calling one of the methods which are not covered by the decorator, you still maintain the decorated data. So that's the feature in the library. So it is possible sometimes. Another question. Yeah, they're now talking about this proxy thing. And they're saying that this is close to this proxy pattern, but I've never seen anything like that in Java. I've never seen this in Ruby, and I asked actually a few times in Ruby community about whether such a library exists which would implement something like that. Nobody said anything about that, so I decided maybe I need to make it. But let me review this proxy idea, proxy pattern. Maybe it's close. Maybe it's something around the same story. I don't know. Maybe I can do it right now. And they say, look, they say in C++, and they give examples of proxy in C++. So that tells me that probably it's not what we're talking about. Because if they make an example in C++, then in Pascal, this is also language precompilable in Java. So I don't think we're talking about proxy, because as we just discussed, it's not possible to do it in Java in an easy way. So probably proxy is, proxy is for, as far as I understand Wikipedia now, it's for like a lazy loading. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's for you guys to find out whether I'm wrong or I'm right. Anyway, that's what I wanted you to show. It would be great if you can implement something like this in other languages and send it my way. I'll be ready to share it with others. And thanks for coming. Thanks for listening today. It was the webinar number 50. I'll try to again make them every month, because we had a delay for about 3 months. Probably we need to do it every month like we did before. So we'll focus on object-oriented programming. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.